Lesson 40, Fighting the Cold War at Home. Lesson 40. Lesson 40, Fighting the Cold War at Home. Lesson 40, Fighting the Cold War at Home. Introduction, normal. Finkelstein wore the dog tag around his neck proudly. Worn by members of the military, these identification tags revealed the name and corresponding regiment of the wounded and killed soldiers, but Finkelstein was no soldier. I was in the fifth grade and had no intentions of joining at that time of joining the army, he remembers. During the early Cold War years, children in towns, cities across the United States wore dog tags imprinted with their names and addresses, some also including their birth date, religion, and blood type. Authorities hoped that these tags would help in the aftermath of a potential nuclear attack. Finkelstein recalls, in case of a nuclear attack, my body could be easily identified. That is, if the dog tag survived and there were others alive to receive that information. It all seemed very strange at the time, and even stranger today. American children growing up in the Cold War era lived in constant fear of attack by Soviet bombers and later guided missiles armed with nuclear weapons, because no one could predict when a nuclear attack would occur. I could never figure out, In addition, wearing Soviet bombers guided missiles. Nuclear weapon, because no one could predict when a nuclear attack would occur. People strive to be both vigilant and prepared. In addition to wearing dog tags, children practiced duck and cover drills at school. When teachers gave a signal, students ducked under their desks and covered their heads with their hands. Historian Doris Kearns Goodwin confessed, I could never figure out how my flimsy desk, with its worn inkwell and its years of name scratching, could protect me from the atomic bomb. For Americans, the Cold War presented a new and unfamiliar type of war. Like earlier conflicts, it stirred fears and anxiety on the home front. The war also raised concerns regarding how to safeguard nations against external forces and unseen enemies while maintaining civil liberties. As in previous wars, it became a challenge for American lawmakers to strike the proper balance between freedom and security. Searching for communists on the home front. In 1951, the federal government published a pamphlet listing 100 questions and answers about communism in the United States. Examples include, what is communism? A system by which one small group seeks to rule the world. What do communists want? To rule your mind and your body from the cradle to the grave. Where can a communist be found in everyday life? Look for him in your school, your labor union, your church, your civic club. 100 Things You Should Know About Communism in the USA, 1951. This publication revealed that the United States fought the Cold War not only against communists in foreign countries, it also fought communism at home. Communists come under suspicion at home. Not all Americans agreed with the government's definition of communism. Some people believed communism offered a much fairer organization of society than capitalism did. Under a communist system, everyone would share equally in what society produced, and the extreme disparity between wealth and poverty would dissolve. Supporters maintained that this would significantly increase human happiness. This utopian vision attracted many American supporters during the Depression. Some of these followers joined the Communist Party outright, while others became communist sympathizers, or people who believed in communist ideology but did not join the party. Even though Communist Party members in the United States was just 43,000 in 1950, the building Cold War incited greater fears of communist subversion, or plots to overthrow the U.S. government and establish a communist dictatorship. To calm public anxiety, President Truman established the Federal Employee Loyalty Program in 1947. It required government employers to take loyalty oaths or pledges of loyalty to the United States, as well as background investigations of employees with possible connections to subversive groups. In 5 million investigations, hundreds of government workers lost their jobs for being potentially disloyal, while several thousand others were forced to resign. HUAC hunts for communists in Hollywood and beyond. Meanwhile, Congress began its own investigation, led by the House Un-American Activities Committee, HUAC, which was formed in 1938 to investigate subversive organizations. In 1947, HUAC shifted its focus to communist influence in the film industry. Large numbers of moving pictures that come out of Hollywood charged one committee member carry communist lying. carry the communist line. The committee called on writers, actors, and directors to testify about their political beliefs. 10 of these witnesses refused to answer committee's questions, called the Hollywood 10. They argued the Fifth Amendment afforded them the right to refuse to testify because the testimony might incriminate them or make them seem guilty. The committee disagreed, charging them with contempt of Congress or willful failure to obey authority of Congress. When the House of Representatives voted to convict the Hollywood 10 of said crime, the group issued a joint statement that warned the United States can keep its constitutional liberty or it can keep the HUAC. It can't keep both. Instead of Hollywood, movie studios became concerned about the impact of the HUAC investigation on their industry. Therefore, they pledged not to hire anyone with communist sympathies, creating a blacklist of people thought to be the Communist Party members or communist sympathizers. Anyone whose name appeared in the blacklist could no longer find work in the film industry. After interrogating the film industry, HUAC moved to other groups. In 1954, it called on labor organizer John Watkins to testify about communist influence in the labor unions. When Watkins refused to answer certain questions, HUAC convinced him of contempt of Congress. Watkins appealed his conviction, arguing that the Constitution does not grant Congress unlimited power to investigate the private lives of citizens, to which the Supreme Court agreed. Writing for the majority, Chief Justice Earl Warren ruled that Congress's power to investigate must be related to the business of making laws. There is no general authority to expose the private affairs of individuals without justification in terms of the functions of Congress. Investigations conducted solely for the personal aggrandizement, glorification of the investigators, or to punish those investigated were indefensible. Watkins versus the United States, 1957. Spy cases raised new fears. Public fears about subversion deepened when Americans in important government positions were charged with working as spies for the Soviet Union. The Alger Hiss case involved a State Department official who had served as an advisor to President Roosevelt at the Yalta Conference. A former communist named Whittaker Chambers accused Hiss of forwarding secrets to the Soviet Union. In 1950, a federal grand jury convicted Hiss of perjury, or lying under oath. Hiss maintained his innocence, but secret documents made public in 1995 indicate that Hiss probably had spied for the Soviet Union. Similarly shocking were claims of Americans helping the Soviet Union test its first atomic bomb in 1949. A year later, a German-born British physicist named Klaus Fuchs confessed that he had spied for the Soviet Union while working on the Manhattan Project for Britain during World War II. The information Fuchs passed along to the Soviet scientists may have helped accelerate their atomic weapons development. From Fuchs, a trail of espionage led the investigators to Ethel and Julius Rosenberg, whom the United States charged with passing atomic secrets to the Soviet Union. The ensuing Rosenberg trial resulted in death sentences for both defendants. At the time, many people protested the verdict and sentences, arguing that the evidence against the suspects was inconclusive. Nonetheless, in 1953, the Rosenbergs were executed, the only American civilians to be killed for spying during the Cold War. The rise and fall of Joseph McCarthy. About 2 weeks after Fuchs confessed to spying, Senator Joseph McCarthy of Wisconsin addressed a West Virginia audience asking how communists had been so successful in overrunning Eastern Europe and China. He declared that the answer could be found in the traitorous actions of Americans working in high government posts, adding, "I have here in my hands a list of 205 names that were made known to the Secretary of State as being members of the Communist Party and who nonetheless are still working and shaping policy in the State Department." McCarthy never produced this list of names, nor did he offer any evidence to support his accusations. Still, he launched a crusade against subversives that rapidly gained momentum. After widespread public support for investigations helped the Republican Party win control of the Senate in 1952, McCarthy was named head of the Government Committee on Operations of the Senate. Over the next 2 years, McCarthy used his newfound power to search for subversives. Although he never amassed a solid case against anyone, McCarthy's accusations still drove some people out of their jobs. For example, under hostile interrogation by McCarthy's chief lawyer, Roy Cohn, Army Signal Corps employee Carl Greenblum broke down and began to cry. As Greenblum collected himself, McCarthy announced, "The witness admits he was lying." Greenblum had not admitted guilt. In fact, he was still fired. This reckless persecution of innocent people became known as McCarthyism. Today, this term signifies the practice of publicly accusing someone of subversive actions without evidence to support the charges. McCarthyism increased public fear. Lawmakers refused to enact reforms that might be interpreted as supporting communism. Schools asked teachers to sign loyalty oaths, and those who objected were fired. Citizens became reluctant to speak out against injustices for for fear of being labeled subversive. This anxiety often became extreme. When a university's graduate students circulated a petition requesting a vending machine in the physics department, some students refused to sign, fearing their names appearing on a list with alleged radical students. McCarthy finally overstepped. In 1954, he accused both the Army and President Dwight D. Eisenhower of being soft on communism. During the nationally televised Army-McCarthy hearings, spellbound Americans watched as McCarthy's reckless tactics were exposed. The climax of the hearings occurred when McCarthy attacked a young man who worked for Joseph Welch, the lawyer representing the Army. An emotional Welch responded, "Little did I dream you could be so reckless and so cruel to do an injury to that lad. It is, I regret to say, equally true that I fear he shall always bear a scar needlessly inflicted by you. If it were in my power to forgive you for your reckless cruelty, I would do so. I like to think I am a gentle man, but your forgiveness will have to come from someone other than me." Joseph Welch, addressing Senator Joseph McCarthy on June 9, 1954. Public opinion quickly turned against McCarthy. Late in 1954, the Senate passed Resolution 301, which censured or formally scolded McCarthy for his destructive actions. His behavior, it stated, had tended to bring the Senate into dishonor and disrepute. McCarthy soon faded from the national scene. The more outlandish Senator McCarthy's accusations grew, the less believable they became. When McCarthy made false charges against a young lawyer working for Joseph Welch during the Army-McCarthy hearings, a disgusted Welch replied, "Have you no sense of decency, sir? At long last, have you left no sense of decency? Negative public sentiment and congressional action work to discredit and erase McCarthy from American politics." Living with nuclear anxiety. A stark white flash enveloped their world. Randy felt heat of his neck. Peyton cried out and covered her face with her hands. In the southeast direction of Tampa, St. Petersburg, and Sarasota, another unnatural sun was born, much larger and infinitely fiercer than the sun in the east. Peyton screamed, "I can't see it! I can't see it, Mommy! Mommy, where are you?" Pat Franklin, Alas, Babylon, 1959. Like many novels written in the 1950s, Pat Frank's Alas, Babylon portrayed a world engulfed by World War III, an imagined conflict fought with weapons capable of destroying all life on Earth. The perils and promise of the atomic age. Books like Alas, Babylon explored the perils of the atomic age. During these early Cold War years, Americans easily recalled the catastrophic destruction caused by the atomic bombs dropped on Japan. People were terrified to consider these bombs destroying American cities, yet by 1949, such attacks seemed plausible. Despite these fears, possessing atomic powers also excited Americans. The media published glowing stories predicting atomic-powered cars, ships, airplanes, and power plants. One newspaper reported, "Atoms in an amount of matter spread out the size of a fingernail say the scientists could supply sufficient energy to propel an ocean liner across the sea and back. An automobile with a microscopic amount of matter from which atomic energy could be released could be driven around for a lifetime if it didn't wear out, never stopping at a gas station." Businesses soon jumped at the atomic bandwagon. The Washington Press Club's bar marked the arrival of the atomic age with Atomic Cocktail. Department stores advertised atomic sales. Musicians recorded songs with titles like Atom Buster and Atom Polka. A French fashion designer named his new two-piece bathing suit the Bikini in honor of the atomic bomb testing on Bikini Atoll in the Central Pacific. atomic bomb tests moved to the Nevada desert in the 1950s. In Las Vegas, the Chamber of Commerce promoted atomic tourism, publishing a schedule of tests and advantageous places to view them from. Armed with atomic lunchboxes, hoping tourists hoping to witness an atomic bomb's power flocked as close to ground zero to the point of the bomb's impact as the government allowed, creating a civil defense system. As the atomic arms race gained momentum, the federal government began planning for civil defense, the organization and training of citizens to work with armed forces and emergency services during a war or natural disaster. In 1951, Congress established the Federal Civil Defense Administration, FCDA. The head of the FCDA warned Americans that their backyard may be the next front line, and distributed millions of civil defense manuals to help people prepare for a nuclear attack. These publications revealed that Americans would not be able to rely on the military to protect them from a surprise attack. Instead, people would have to prepare to protect themselves as best they could. Civil defense preparedness soon integrated into daily life. Many communities set up bomb shelters in public buildings. Stocked with emergency food and water supplies, these shelters would offer refuge during an attack. Weekly warning sirens and emergency radio station tests were conducted across the country. Civil defense workers called block wardens trained their neighbors how to fight fires and provide first aid following an attack. Children also participated in civil defense training. The FCDA developed a film and corresponding booklet featuring a character called Bert the Turtle, who taught children how to protect themselves during the atomic explosion. Bert demonstrated duck and cover drills to prepare children for hearing an emergency siren. Some families furthered the preparedness by constructing an underground shelter in their backyard. Several companies sold prefabricated, quote, fallout shelters for single-family use, which were designed to shield families not only from an atomic explosion, but also from the resulting radioactive dust that falls out from the sky. Authorities advised families to remain sealed in their fallout shelters for several weeks after an attack to let toxic dust settle. Preparedness versus peace. These early civil defense preparations were founded on the expectation of an atomic bomb attack. By the mid-1950s, the development of far more powerful H-bombs raised questions about the effectiveness of such methods. Facing this new threat, the FCDA determined that the only practical way to protect large numbers of people during an attack was to evacuate them from target cities. It's much better to get people out, even if the process may kill someone, said a civil defense planner, than to have millions of Americans just stay there and be killed. The FCDA designed a large-scale civil defense drill, Operation Alert, to test how quickly cities could be evacuated. On June 15, 1955, sirens wailed across the country, sparking mixed reactions. Some people ducked into bomb shelters, others fled town, but many paid little or no attention to the drill. In a subsequent editorial, the New York Times observed that millions of people would have died had this been a real attack. The editorial concluded that this demonstration gives new emphasis to President Eisenhower's dictum that war no longer presents the possibility of victory or defeat, but only varying degrees of destruction, and that there is no substitute for a just and lasting peace. New York Times, June 16, 1955. The FCDA continued Operation Alert drills throughout the 1950s. For a growing number of Americans, the drills presented an opportunity to protest the nuclear arms race. In 1960, a group of young mothers in New York City organized hundreds of protesters around their belief that peace is the only defense against nuclear war. We got in this section House on Un-American Activities Committee, HUAC, spy trials, McCarthyism, atomic age, and federal civil defense organization. We've got atomic age. We've got subversion, loyalty oaths. We've got the Rosenberg trial, blacklist. Klaus Fuchs. And that Trump lawyer, that Trump McCarthy lawyer, was Roy Cohn. Roy Cohn.